That drink did not touch my shirt first, Darius Coles said quietly. It touched your company's future. The hotel lounge went silent so fast the music seemed to lose its place. A moment earlier, the bar on the second floor of the Austin Meridian Hotel had been glowing with conference money, soft jazz, polished shoes, expensive perfume, and the low, confident laughter of people who believed every room had been built with them in mind. Then Madison Blake lifted her old-fashioned and poured it down the front of Darius Cole's white shirt. The amber liquid spread across the cotton in a dark stain, sliding past the open collar, dripping from his sleeve, carrying the sharp smell of bourbon, orange peel, and melted ice. One cube struck the hardwood floor and spun beneath the table. A bartender stopped mid-pour. Two men near the window turned with their glasses still raised. Elena Price, the lounge manager, froze beside the host's stand with a reservation tablet in her hand. Madison stood over Darius with her cream-colored suit untouched, her blonde hair smooth, her expression cold enough to make the room feel smaller. She had arrived with two colleagues from Voss Meridian Energy, flushed from a private networking reception upstairs, expecting the corner VIP table to be waiting because people like her were used to being expected. But the table had already been reserved under Cole Horizon Capital, and Darius had been sitting there alone for 15 minutes, drinking sparkling water, reviewing final notes, for a meeting that was supposed to happen the next morning. Madison had looked at him once and decided he was the mistake. No badge glittering from his jacket. No loud watch. No circle of assistants. Just a black man in a white shirt, dark slacks, and a charcoal blazer folded neatly beside him, sitting in a space she believed should have recognized her first. When Elena explained that the table was not available, Madison did not hear policy. She heard refusal. Her eyes moved to Darius the way some people look at luggage left in the wrong hallway. "This lounge is for executives," she said, her voice clean and sharp. "Not men pretending to belong." Darius had looked up from his phone then, not startled, only tired in a way that went deeper than the evening. "The table is mine," he said. "I am waiting for a business meeting." He turned the screen toward her, showing the reservation confirmation and the name Cole Horizon Capital in black letters against white light. Madison did not look long enough to read it. Her colleague, a younger man with nervous eyes, murmured, "Madison, maybe we should check?" But Pride had already closed the door. "I do not need to check anything," she said. "I know when someone is taking advantage of a room he was never meant to enter." That was when the drink tilted. Not thrown in rage. Not accidental. Poured with the slow certainty of someone trying to turn humiliation into a lesson. The liquid fell. The room watched. Darius did not jump back. He did not raise his hand. He did not give her the performance she expected from the pain she had caused. He simply reached for a white cloth napkin, pressed it once against his shirt, and stood. He was taller than she had realized, broader in the shoulders, calm in a way that made her sudden victory feel strangely fragile. His eyes held hers without heat, without fear, and without apology. "You just cost your company $100 million, he said. Madison laughed once, too quickly. "Excuse me?" Darius picked up his phone. His thumb moved across the screen with the precision of a man making a decision, not a threat. "Pause all Voss Meridian documents," he said into the call, his voice low enough that the room leaned in to hear. "Effective now. No signatures tomorrow." Madison's smile faded by one small degree. Elena stepped forward with towels, her face pale with embarrassment on behalf of the room. Around them, conference guests stared into the silence, some ashamed, some curious, some recording before they understood what they were capturing. Darius took the towel from Elena and gave her a gentle nod. "Thank you," he said. Then he looked back at Madison, who was finally beginning to feel the floor shift beneath her expensive heels. "Power is not where you sit," he said. "It is what you choose to see before you speak." He placed enough cash on the table to cover his untouched drink, lifted his blazer from the chair, and walked toward the exit with bourbon drying across his shirt, and every eye in the lounge following him. Madison remained by the VIP table, surrounded by glass, money, and the first cold edge of consequence. Darius Cole did not return to his room right away. He walked through the side doors of the Austin Meridian Hotel and stepped into the thick Texas night, where warm rain had turned the sidewalk black and glossy beneath the streetlights. The city moved around him in layers, rideshare cars pulling to the curb, conference guests laughing under umbrellas, the distant hum of traffic along Congress Avenue, and the low roll of thunder somewhere beyond the skyline. Bourbon clung to his shirt, cooling against his skin as the damp air touched it. He could have gone upstairs, changed clothes, called his attorneys again, and turned the entire evening into a clean business decision by midnight. Instead, he stood beneath the hotel awning with his blazer folded over one arm and let himself breathe. One breath in. One breath out. The stain on his shirt was not the first stain someone had tried to put on him. He had learned that lesson long before hotel lounges and investment conferences, long before people began introducing him as the founder of Cole Horizon Capital with careful respect in their voices. Darius had grown up on the east side of Houston, in a two-bedroom house where the air conditioner rattled through summer nights and his father came home smelling like engine oil, hot metal, and honest work. Nathaniel Cole owned a small repair shop wedged between a laundromat and a tire store, and he carried himself with the quiet pride of a man who could fix nearly anything except the way the world looked at his son. When Darius was 12, he watched a customer toss car keys onto the counter instead of placing them in his father's hand. His father picked them up without reacting, wrote the estimate, and later, while closing the garage doors, said, "Son, dignity is what you keep when they try to price you cheap." Darius had not understood the full weight of that sentence then. He understood it now. He understood it in boardrooms where people mistook silence for lack of confidence. He understood it in hotel lobbies where security guards studied him a second longer than everyone else. He understood it in the careful surprise on faces when they learned that the quiet black man with no entourage controlled capital they had spent months chasing. None of it had made him bitter, but it had made him precise. He did not waste energy proving himself to people committed to misunderstanding him. He invested where the money could become something useful: solar training programs, battery storage for neighborhoods hit hardest by power outages, clean energy projects that hired from the communities they served. Tomorrow's $100 million commitment to Voss Meridian Energy had been supposed to expand a battery facility outside San Antonio and fund job training across Houston, Beaumont, and parts of rural Louisiana. It was not charity. It was strategy with a conscience. Good returns, cleaner air, stable work, and lower energy costs for families who knew exactly what it meant when the power bill climbed faster than the paycheck. That was why Darius had flown in after a long week, carried his own bag, and taken the corner table without fanfare. He had wanted one quiet conversation before signatures and cameras, one final read of the people behind the pitch deck. Madison Blake had given him that read without ever opening the file. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from Priya Shah, his general counsel. "I received your message," she said when he answered. "Do you want all documents paused or formally withdrawn?" Darius looked through the hotel windows. Inside the lounge, Madison still stood near the VIP table, her colleagues speaking quickly around her, Elena Price watching from the host's stand with a troubled expression. "Pause," Darius said. "Not withdrawn yet." Priya was silent for half a beat. She knew him well enough to hear the difference. "You are giving them room to respond. I am giving the workers room to matter." Across the street, rainwater ran along the curb in thin silver lines. Darius imagined the training center in Houston, the welding tables, the solar panels stacked in the yard, the young people who had signed up because someone told them this project might become a real job, not another promise that dissolved after election season or investor applause. He could punish Madison easily. He could walk away and never think of Voss Meridian again. But punishment alone would not build anything. It would not hire one apprentice, power one clinic, or make one neighborhood breathe easier. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Then he took out his wallet, not for money, but for the small photograph tucked behind his license, his father standing in front of the old garage, blue work shirt darkened with sweat, one hand resting on a toolbox, eyes tired but unbent. Darius touched the edge of the photo and felt the night settle around him. The stain on his shirt would wash out. The question beneath it would not. What kind of company had Madison learned that behavior inside? What kind of leadership rewarded a woman who could humiliate a stranger before reading his name? What kind of culture would manage a project meant to serve working communities if it could not recognize the humanity of the man funding it? Darius folded the wallet shut. Behind him, the hotel doors opened, and the lounge noise spilled briefly into the rain before closing again. He did not turn. Not yet. He looked up at the warm lights of the building, then toward the darker streets beyond the conference district, where the people most affected by tomorrow's deal would never set foot in that bar. His decision had not been made by anger. It had been made by memory, by discipline, and by the old lesson his father had left him like a tool that still fit the hand. Dignity was not walking away because someone insulted you. Sometimes dignity was refusing to let your money bless the insult. Inside the lounge, Madison Blake tried to laugh the moment back into something smaller. It did not work. The sound came out too bright, too thin, and died before it reached the ceiling. Around her, the Austin Meridian Hotel bar had not returned to normal. The jazz was still playing, glasses still glowed under amber light, and the bartenders still moved with practiced elegance. But every conversation had changed shape. People were speaking lower now. Looking sideways. Pretending not to look at the dark stain Darius Cole had left behind in the room without leaving behind any of his dignity. Madison stood beside the corner table with her empty glass in hand, suddenly aware of how exposed her fingers looked wrapped around nothing. Her two colleagues from Voss Meridian Energy hovered near her like men unsure whether loyalty required comfort or distance. Trevor, the younger one, kept glancing toward the exit. "Madison," he said carefully. "Who exactly was that?" She turned on him too fast. "A man who got dramatic because he was embarrassed." Trevor swallowed. "He said Voss Meridian Documents." "People say things." He knew the company name. Madison's jaw tightened. She looked toward Elena Price, the lounge manager, who was now speaking quietly with a hotel security supervisor near the host's stand. Elena's expression was not accusatory, but it was worse than that. It was disappointed. Madison hated disappointment when it came from service staff. It implied equality. It implied judgment could travel upward. She placed the empty glass on the table with more force than necessary, though carefully enough not to make a scene twice. "We are in Austin during the largest energy conference in the state," she said. "Half the people in this hotel know who we are." Her other colleague Ben said nothing. He had been with Madison long enough to know when her confidence had become a wall she was building in real time. Madison Blake had spent 10 years becoming the kind of woman no one overlooked. She had grown up outside Dallas in a neighborhood of clean lawns, private schools, and fathers who talked about markets over steak dinners while mothers taught daughters which rooms were worth entering. She had learned early that charm was useful, but control was safer. At Southern Methodist University, she outworked men who assumed she was decorative. At her first energy firm, she memorized drilling data, transmission costs, and tax credit language until executives who barely remembered her name needed her notes before walking into meetings. By 34, she had become vice president of strategic development at Voss Meridian Energy, the person Richard Voss sent into difficult rooms when the company needed a smile sharp enough to cut through hesitation. She was not unintelligent. She was not lazy. That was what made her failure more dangerous. It had not come from ignorance alone. It had come from a habit dressed up as instinct. She trusted status when it looked familiar. She trusted confidence when it arrived in the right fabric, with the right accent, beside the right people. She had built her life proving she belonged among power, and somewhere along the climb she began guarding the door, as if dignity were a private club. Elena approached with a folded towel over one arm and Madison's reservation record on the tablet. Her voice remained professional, but not warm. "Ms. Blake, I need to document what happened." Madison blinked. Document? Yes. A guest was involved in an incident in our lounge. An incident? Madison repeated, as though the word itself had insulted her. He refused to leave a table. Elena looked down at the tablet, then back up. The table was reserved under Cole Horizon Capital. Madison felt a small, cold sensation move behind her ribs, but pride covered it quickly. That does not mean anything to me. Trevor took out his phone. His face changed before he finished typing. Madison. She did not look at him. Not now. You need to see this. I said not now. Elena's gaze shifted to Trevor's screen, and her face tightened. Ben leaned over, then went very still. The silence around Madison changed again, this time gathering weight from people who had information she did not. She finally snatched the phone from Trevor's hand. On the screen was a profile photo from a business journal. Darius Nathaniel Cole, founder and managing partner of Cole Horizon Capital, known for major clean energy infrastructure investments across underserved communities. Beneath it, a headline mentioned a planned $100 million allocation for battery storage and workforce development in Texas and the Gulf Coast. For half a second, Madison heard nothing. Not the jazz. Not the rain against the windows. Not the lounge guests whispering nearby. Only the echo of his voice, calm and exact. You just cost your company $100 million. Her fingers tightened around the phone until the screen dimmed. This cannot be right, she whispered. But the photograph was right. The name was right. The reservation had been right. The only thing wrong had been her certainty. Elena took the phone gently from her hand before it slipped. Ms. Blake, she said softer now, I think you should call your office. Madison looked toward the doors where Darius had walked out with bourbon on his shirt and no apology in his steps. For the first time that night, the room she had tried to control felt enormous, and she felt very small inside it. Madison did not sleep that night. By 2:15 in the morning, she was still sitting at the small glass desk in her hotel room with the curtains open and Austin glowing below her in wet gold and blue. The cream suit she had worn in the lounge hung over the back of a chair like evidence. Her phone lay face up beside her laptop, filling the room with one quiet vibration after another. Trevor had called twice. Ben had texted once, only 3 words, Richard knows everything. Elena Price had already filed the hotel report, careful and exact, with timestamps, witness names, the reservation record, and a written statement that Madison had ignored proof the table belonged to Darius Cole before humiliating him in front of guests. Someone in the lounge had recorded the moment, but that was not what frightened Madison most. The video could damage her reputation. The report could trigger an internal review. Richard Voss could take away her title by sunrise. But none of that was as heavy as the memory of Darius standing there, stained shirt, steady eyes, and a voice so controlled it made her cruelty look childish. She opened the Cole Horizon Capital profile again. The article loaded slowly over the hotel wireless connection, and his photograph appeared on the screen. No performance, no expensive pose, just a composed man with the kind of presence that did not need decoration. Madison scrolled through projects she had never bothered to understand beyond the numbers. Battery storage in neighborhoods that lost power during heat waves. Solar training programs for workers who had been laid off from refineries and repair shops. Microgrid financing for clinics along the Gulf Coast. Apprenticeships in Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur, and rural Louisiana. The $100 million commitment was not just a line in Voss Meridian's growth plan. It was equipment, classrooms, wages, buses, child care stipends, and neighborhoods that had learned not to believe corporate promises until the trucks actually arrived. Madison closed her laptop halfway, then opened it again. She saw herself reflected in the dark strip of the screen, tired eyes, perfect hair now loosened, confidence cracked but not yet gone. A part of her wanted to build a defense. She was under pressure. The lounge was crowded. She thought he was being difficult. She did not know who he was. But every excuse ended against the same wall. She had not needed to know who he was to treat him like a human being. At 6:40 in the morning, the call came from Richard Voss. Madison answered before the second vibration. "Richard, I can explain." "No," he said. His voice was not loud, which made it worse. "You can come downstairs." The emergency meeting was held in a private conference room on the hotel's mezzanine level, not at the convention center as planned. The room had beige walls, a long table, a pitcher of untouched water, and the flat, stale smell of air conditioning that had run all night. Richard Voss stood at the far end in a dark suit, silver hair neat, jaw tight. Beside him were Voss Meridian's legal counsel, two board advisors on a video screen, Trevor, Ben, and the company's chief financial officer, whose face looked pale under the fluorescent lights. Madison entered with her tablet pressed to her chest. No one greeted her. Richard lifted a remote and turned on the wall monitor. Darius Cole's photograph appeared first. Then the hotel report. Then a pause frame from the lounge video, Madison's arm extended, the amber drink falling through the air, Darius still seated beneath it. Madison felt the air leave her body in a slow, humiliating breath. Richard did not look at the screen. He looked at her. "Tell me that is not our lead investor." Madison's mouth opened, but no useful sound came out. Trevor stared at the table. Ben looked at his shoes. The legal counsel folded her hands and waited. Richard clicked to the next slide. Cole Horizon Capital Notice of Suspension. All Voss Meridian documents paused pending cultural and governance review. Effective immediately. "Do you understand what that means?" Richard asked. Madison forced herself to answer. "The commitment is on hold. The commitment is the only reason our lenders agreed to extend the battery facility loan," Richard said. "Without it, we lose the San Antonio expansion, the Houston workforce program, and possibly our Series D bridge. You did not just embarrass yourself in a bar. You put the entire project at risk." The words landed one by one, not dramatic, not unfair, simply true. Madison looked at the frozen image on the screen. For the first time, she did not see a man taking a table. She saw a man she had chosen not to see. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. Richard's answer came fast. "Fix it." Then, after a hard pause, he added, "And understand something, Madison. If you go to him only to save this deal, he will know before you finish your first sentence." The room settled into silence. Outside the conference room, conference guests were beginning to move through the hotel with coffee cups and badge lanyards, ready for panels about innovation, sustainability, and the future. Inside, Madison Blake stared at the cost of her own prejudice, and for once, the number was not the most painful part. By mid-morning, Madison Blake was standing outside the Austin Meridian Hotel with a suitcase she had not bothered to pack neatly, and a phone full of messages she could not bring herself to answer. Richard had given her one instruction, but no protection from the meaning of it. "Fix it." The words followed her through the sliding glass doors, across the damp curb, and into the back seat of a rideshare car headed toward the airport. The city passed by in streaks of wet asphalt, limestone buildings, food trucks opening for the day, and conference banners fluttering from street poles like cheerful lies. Inside the car, Madison sat very still, hands folded around her phone, watching her own reflection in the window. She looked like someone going to negotiate. She felt like someone going to confess. Darius Cole had not agreed to meet at a restaurant, hotel office, or airport lounge. His assistant had answered Madison's request with a short message, "Mr. Cole will be at the Houston Clean Futures Training Center at 2 o'clock. If Ms. Blake wishes to speak, she may come there." No courtesy title beyond her name. No promise of privacy. No reassurance that he would listen. The flight to Houston took less than an hour, but Madison felt every minute stretch. She tried 3 times to draft an apology in her notes app. Each version sounded polished, and therefore false. "I regret the misunderstanding." Delete. "I was under pressure." Delete. "I did not realize who you were." She stared at that sentence longer than the others, then deleted it with more force than necessary. That was the ugliest truth hiding inside the convenient one. She had not realized who he was, but she should not have needed his money, title, or profile to recognize his humanity. When the car finally pulled up to the training center in Houston, the sun had broken through the clouds and turned the parking lot bright with steam. The building was plain, low, and practical, with a blue sign, a row of solar panels on metal racks, and a group of young trainees in work gloves gathered near a demonstration roof. This was not the world Madison knew how to charm. There was no host stand, no private table, no executive badge. Just heat, tools, instruction, and people learning skills that could change the shape of their lives. She stepped out in a simple gray blazer and dark pants, her expensive conference suit left behind in her bag. The air smelled of warm pavement, cut grass, electrical tape, and dust. Through an open bay door, she saw Darius standing beside a workbench with a group of trainees, his sleeves rolled, his ruined white shirt replaced by a clean pale blue one. He was listening to a young woman explain a wiring diagram, not interrupting, not performing importance. When she finished, he nodded once and asked a question that made her smile with nervous pride. Madison stopped at the edge of the room. For the first time, she saw what his money looked like when it became opportunity. Not a press release. Not a market expansion. A 19-year-old learning how to wire a solar inverter. A former refinery worker practicing battery safety protocols. A single mother in steel-toed boots writing notes in the margin of a handbook. Darius turned before anyone announced her. His expression did not change, but the room felt his attention shift. The trainees looked between them, sensing a story they had not been told. Madison walked forward slowly. Every step carried the sound of her mistake from the lounge, the amber drink, the silence, the look in his eyes. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice was steady enough to be heard, but not strong enough to hide behind. "Thank you for allowing me to come." Darius placed the marker he had been holding on the workbench. "I allowed you to enter the building," he said. "That is not the same as allowing you to repair what happened." Madison nodded because there was no defense against the truth. A few trainees looked down, uncomfortable with the sharpness of the moment. Darius did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Why are you here, Ms. Blake?" he asked. She looked around the training center before answering. The ceiling fans turned slowly above them. Sunlight lay across the concrete floor in hard white rectangles. A young man in safety glasses watched her with the same guarded expression she had once mistaken for attitude in rooms where she held power. Madison felt shame rise in her throat, but this time she did not turn it into pride. "Last night I treated you as if you did not belong in a place where you had every right to sit," she said. "I made assumptions about you because you were a black man alone in a room I thought belonged to people like me. I did not look at your reservation. I did not listen when you spoke. I humiliated you because I believed my status gave me permission." The training center was quiet now. Darius held her gaze, still unreadable. Madison continued softer but clearer. "And this morning, I saw what the investment meant. Jobs. Training. Energy projects for people my company uses in presentations but rarely sits beside. I need the deal, yes. My company needs it. But I came here because I finally understand that I insulted more than a potential investor. I insulted the purpose behind the money." Darius looked past her toward the open bay door, where the solar panels flashed under the Texas sun. When he spoke, his voice was calm enough to make every word land. "Understanding is not the same as changing." Madison nodded. "I know." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside and gestured toward the workbench. "Then start by listening. Not to me. To them." Madison looked at the trainees, at the notebooks, the tools, the future waiting in unfinished form. For the first time in years, she entered a room without trying to own it. Madison spent the next 40 minutes listening without a notebook in her hand. That was harder for her than she expected. She had built a career out of taking notes, controlling language, converting other people's needs into bullet points that could survive a board meeting. But inside the Houston Clean Futures Training Center, the stories did not arrive in polished phrases. They came in work boots, careful pauses, nervous laughter, and hands rough from jobs that had paid too little for too long. A former refinery worker named Luis explained how layoffs had made him feel invisible after 20 years of knowing machines better than most engineers knew their software. A single mother named Tasha described studying battery systems at night after putting her children to bed, hoping the certification would mean a job with health insurance instead of another temporary schedule that changed every week. A young man named Andre admitted he had almost skipped the program because people in suits had promised opportunity in his neighborhood before and left nothing but banners, cameras, and locked doors. Madison stood near the workbench, sunlight bright against the concrete floor, and felt every sentence remove another layer of the story she had told herself about success. These were not abstract communities. These were people who knew exactly when a company was using them for language, and when it was willing to share power. Darius watched from beside a row of solar panels, arms folded loosely, saying almost nothing. His silence was not permission. It was measurement. Madison could feel him weighing whether her attention had depth or merely fear. When the trainees returned to their stations, the room filled again with the sound of tools, soft instruction, and the steady turn of ceiling fans. Darius walked toward the open bay door, and Madison followed him into the heat. Outside, the afternoon sun pressed hard against the asphalt. Beyond the training yard, Houston stretched low and wide, a city of freeways, warehouses, churches, clinics, repair shops, and neighborhoods where energy policy was not a panel discussion, but a bill on the kitchen table. Darius stopped beside a rack of solar panels angled toward the sky. "My father's garage was 6 miles from here," he said. "In August, when the power went out, people would come sit inside because he kept an old generator running for fans and cold water. He could not fix the grid. But he could make one room bearable." Madison looked at him, unsure whether to speak. He continued, "That is what this money is supposed to do. Make more rooms bearable. More jobs reachable. More futures possible. So when someone from your company treats a black man at a reserved table like he is trespassing on dignity, I have to ask what happens when the cameras are gone and the community asks to be treated as a partner." The words landed without cruelty, which made them harder to avoid. Madison looked down at the pale dust on her shoes. "I cannot undo what I did." "No," Darius said. "You cannot." The bluntness settled between them. A truck passed on the road beyond the fence, its tires humming over warm pavement. Madison inhaled slowly. "But I can stop asking you to make my mistake disappear. I can own it where it happened, inside the company that benefited from the way I learned to see people." Darius studied her. "What does that mean when it costs you?" Madison knew the answer could not sound easy. "It means I apologize publicly, not privately. It means I tell Richard and the board that this was not a misunderstanding. It means I support an outside culture review even if it damages my promotion track. It means the workforce program is not decorative. It gets real funding, decision-making input from the communities involved, and hiring targets that cannot be edited out after the press release." For the first time since she arrived, Darius's expression shifted slightly. Not approval. Not forgiveness. Attention. "And if your company refuses?" he asked. Madison looked back through the open door at the trainees working beneath the fans. She thought of the lounge, the glass, the old-fashioned in her hand, the terrible ease with which she had mistaken access for worth. "Then maybe it does not deserve your capital," she said. The answer surprised her because it was not strategic. It was true. Darius let the silence hold for a moment, long enough for the heat, the tools, and the distant traffic to make the world feel real again. Then he reached into his pocket and took out his phone. "I will ask my counsel to draft revised conditions," he said. Madison closed her eyes briefly, not in relief exactly, but in the weight of being given a chance she had not earned. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet," Darius replied. "This is not about saving your comfort. It is about protecting their future." He nodded toward the training center. Inside, Andre lifted a panel with Luis helping him guide the frame into place, both of them focused, careful, building something that would outlast the shame of one night if the right people had the discipline to let it. If this moment touched your heart, remember this: real strength is not refusing to forgive, it is refusing to let forgiveness come without change. Madison watched the panel catch sunlight, bright and clean across its dark surface. For once, she did not imagine herself at the center of the story. She imagined the work continuing after she left, and understood that was the point. By the time Madison returned to Austin that evening, the conference lights no longer looked glamorous. They looked artificial, bright enough to hide dust but not truth. The Voss Meridian Energy Emergency Board session had been moved from the hotel mezzanine to a private meeting room at the convention center, where the walls were covered with clean energy banners showing smiling families, blue skies, and fields of solar panels under perfect sunlight. Madison paused outside the door with Darius's revised conditions in her hand and understood, with a kind of quiet pain, how easily companies learn to decorate themselves with the people they refuse to hear. Inside, Richard Voss stood near the head of the table, surrounded by legal counsel, senior advisors, and 3 board members on a video screen. Trevor and Ben sat along the wall, both looking as if the day had aged them. The chief financial officer had a laptop open to the funding timeline, where every path still led back to Coal Horizon Capital. Richard saw Madison enter and did not waste time. "Do you have an answer?" he asked. Madison placed the document on the table. "I have conditions." Richard's eyes narrowed. "From Cole?" "From Mr. Cole, yes." Legal counsel reached for the pages first, but Madison kept her hand on them for 1 extra second. Not to control the room, not this time, but to force herself to speak before the lawyers turned morality into language. "Before we discuss the terms," she said, "I need to state something clearly. What happened last night was not a misunderstanding. I discriminated against a black man because I assumed he did not belong in a space I associated with status and power. I ignored evidence. I humiliated him publicly. That behavior came from me, but it also came from a culture that rewarded me for moving fast, judging fast, and treating access like proof of worth." The room went still. Richard's face hardened, though not with surprise. He looked like a man calculating damage. "Madison, this is not the time for a speech." "It is exactly the time," she said, and her voice did not rise. That steadiness startled her. "Because if we take his capital without changing why he paused it, we will prove he was right to walk away." One board member on the screen leaned forward. "What are the conditions?" Madison slid the document across the table. "A public apology to Mr. Cole and the hotel staff who witnessed the incident. A third-party culture and bias review with authority to recommend leadership changes. A protected workforce development fund tied to the Houston Training Center and the San Antonio Battery expansion. Community advisory seats with real voting input over hiring and site commitments. No reduction of those programs after funding closes. And if we violate the equity terms, Coal Horizon can suspend future tranches." The chief financial officer exhaled as if each sentence had a price tag. Richard picked up the paper and read quickly, his jaw tightening. "This is not investment. This is oversight." Madison looked at him. "Yes." The words surprised the room more than the conditions did. Richard lowered the pages. "You understand what you are endorsing? You are inviting an outside investor to examine our internal culture because of your mistake." "No," Madison said. "Because my mistake revealed something we should have examined before." Trevor looked up then, and for the first time since the lounge, his face held something like respect. Richard turned away toward the window. Beyond the convention center glass, Austin shimmered under the last wet light of evening. The city looked clean from a distance, all towers and bridges, but the roads below still held puddles from the storm. "If we reject this," the chief financial officer said carefully, "the bridge lenders will likely withdraw by Monday. The San Antonio facility stalls. We lose the Houston training partnership. We may survive, but not intact. And if we accept, a board member asked. Legal counsel answered. We keep the commitment path open, but we accept accountability mechanisms that will be difficult to unwind. Madison almost laughed at the phrase, but there was no humor left in her. Difficult to unwind. As if accountability were a knot, not a compass. Richard remained silent for a long moment. Then he turned back and fixed his eyes on Madison. And what happens to you? He asked. She knew what he meant. Her promotion. Her authority. Her reputation as the closer who never lost a deal. The woman who could turn any room into a stage had become the reason the stage lights were burning too hot. Madison looked at the clean energy banner behind him, at the painted family standing in a field of sunlight, at the future her company had been selling without fully respecting the people inside it. That is for the review to decide, she said. But I will not ask the company to protect me from the truth. No one spoke. The air conditioning hummed above them. Somewhere outside, conference attendees applauded at the end of a panel, a distant sound from a world still pretending innovation could exist without conscience. Richard finally sat down. He read the first page again, slower this time. Call Cole Horizon, he said to legal counsel. Tell them we are prepared to proceed under revised terms. Madison closed her eyes for one brief second. Not in victory. There was no victory here. Only a door left open because the person she had wronged had chosen purpose over pride. When she opened them, Richard was watching her with an expression she could not read. Tomorrow morning, he said. You apologize publicly. Madison nodded. I know. No script. She looked down at the page, then back up. No script. Outside the glass, the last of the sunlight slipped behind the buildings, leaving the room in a softer gray. Madison thought of Darius standing under the training center's open bay door, telling her this was not about saving her comfort. For the first time, she understood that redemption was not a feeling that arrived when shame faded. It was a structure built after shame told the truth. The next morning, the apology did not happen in a ballroom or behind a closed boardroom door. Darius had refused both. If the harm had happened in a public room, then the truth could not be hidden inside a private one. So at 9:15, in a conference hall overlooking downtown Austin, Voss Meridian Energy gathered employees, partners, training program representatives, hotel management, and the core investment team from Cole Horizon Capital. The room held the quiet tension of people waiting to see whether accountability would arrive as courage or as theater. Rows of chairs faced a low stage, but Madison Blake did not stand behind the podium. She stood in front of it, with no notes in her hands, wearing a simple gray blazer and the kind of expression that could not be softened by makeup, lighting, or title. Darius sat in the front row, not centered like a guest of honor, but slightly to the side, his hands folded, his face calm and unreadable. Elena Price sat 2 rows behind him, still in her hotel manager's navy uniform. Trevor and Ben stood along the wall. Richard Voss remained near the back, his arms crossed, watching not only Madison but the room that would judge whether Voss Meridian could become more than its damage. Madison looked first at Darius, then at Elena, then at the employees whose work she had nearly endangered. Her throat tightened, but she did not look away. Last night, in the hotel lounge, I humiliated a black man who had every right to be there, she said. The room went still. I made assumptions about him before I read his name, before I listened to his words, before I looked at the proof he offered me. I treated him as if his presence needed my approval. It did not. I treated him as if my status gave me the right to decide who belonged. It did not. Her voice shook slightly on the last sentence, but it did not break. Darius watched her the way he had watched trainees learn a difficult tool, not praising the attempt, not dismissing it, simply seeing whether the hands would steady. Madison turned toward Elena. I also put hotel staff in the position of having to clean up my prejudice while remaining professional. Miss Price, I am sorry. Elena's face softened, but she gave only a small nod. Madison faced the room again. And to the people whose jobs, training, and communities depend on this project, I am sorry for making the future of that work less certain because I refuse to see the humanity of one man." A long silence followed. No one rushed to clap. That mattered. Madison had expected the silence to feel like punishment, but instead it felt like air finally entering a room that had been sealed too long. Richard stepped forward only after the pause had done its work. "Voss Meridian Energy has accepted Coal Horizon Capital's revised conditions," he said. "The agreement now includes protected community workforce funding, external culture review, community advisory seats, and enforceable equity terms tied to future capital." His voice was formal, but the words were not empty. Legal counsel sat at a side table with the revised documents open. Darius rose from the front row and walked toward the signing table. The room followed him with its eyes. Madison did not move toward him too quickly. She waited until he reached the table, then spoke softly enough that only those nearby could hear. "I know this does not make it right." Darius picked up the pen, then paused. "No," he said. "It makes it accountable." She nodded, accepting the difference. He signed first. Not the full closing, not money released without guardrails, but a binding commitment to proceed under terms that protected the project from becoming another promise stripped down for profit. Madison signed the company acknowledgement after Richard, her hand steady now for a different reason than pride. When the final signature was placed, the room still did not erupt. The reaction came slowly, like people allowing themselves to believe a door had stayed open. A trainee representative from Houston exhaled and wiped her eyes. Elena lowered her gaze, relieved. Trevor looked at Madison with something that was not forgiveness, but maybe the first shape of respect. Darius closed the folder and slid it toward legal counsel. Then he turned to the room. "Capital can build things," he said. "But character decides who those things are built for." No one spoke. Outside the windows, Austin shone after rain, streets drying under a pale morning sun. Madison stood beside the signing table, no longer trying to command the frame. She watched Darius return to his seat, carrying himself with the same calm dignity he had carried when he walked out stained and alone. The difference was that now the room understood what his silence had meant. It had never been weakness. It had been strength waiting for truth to catch up. 1 week later, the Houston Clean Futures Training Center opened its doors before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops. The morning air was already warm, carrying the smell of cut grass, metal racks, fresh coffee, and dust rising from the parking lot as vans pulled in one by one. There were no velvet ropes, no champagne, no glossy celebration built for cameras. Just folding chairs, tool benches, solar panels angled toward the pale Texas sky, and people arriving in work shirts, steel-toed boots, nursing scrubs, delivery uniforms, and church clothes because they wanted to see whether a promise made in a conference hall would become something real. Darius Cole stood near the open bay door in a dark blue suit without a tie, speaking quietly with Luis, Tasha, and Andre as instructors prepared the first expanded training session funded under the revised agreement. His father's old photograph rested inside his wallet, close enough to touch but not needed now. The lesson was already in the room. Dignity had become structure. Memory had become opportunity. Across the training yard, Madison Blake stepped out of a plain company car with Richard Voss and 2 members of the outside review team. She was not leading the group. She was walking with it. That difference mattered. She wore simple dark pants and a white blouse under a light blazer, her face serious, her hands empty. No speech folder. No prepared smile. When she entered the bay, some people looked at her with caution. Some looked away. A few recognized her from the conference video that had moved through phones faster than any official statement could control. Madison accepted their silence without trying to soften it. She had learned that discomfort was not always harm. Sometimes it was the first honest price of repair. Darius noticed her but did not move toward her immediately. He watched as she stopped near Tasha, listened while the young mother explained the child care stipend issue, and wrote it down only after asking permission. He watched her speak to Andre without leaning over him, without correcting his words into corporate language. He watched Richard stand beside a community advisor and hear, perhaps for the first time, that a hiring commitment meant nothing if bus routes did not reach the training site before morning shift. The sun climbed higher, striking the panels until they flashed dark blue and silver. Inside the bay, a new banner had been hung, not with a slogan, but with a schedule: safety certification, inverter installation, battery storage basics, paid apprenticeship interviews. Real dates. Real names. Real work. By mid-morning, the first signing table was set near the training racks, not for investors, but for students entering the program. Darius stood to the side as Lee signed his apprenticeship paperwork. Tasha signed next, then Andre, his hands slow but steady. Madison stood several feet away, watching without inserting herself into the moment. When Andre looked up and saw Darius, he grinned like someone trying not to show how much the paper mattered. Darius gave him a nod. Not grand. Not public. Enough. Later, Madison found Darius outside beside the solar racks, where heat shimmered above the pavement, and the city hummed beyond the fence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was different now. Not accusation. Not absolution. Something unfinished, but no longer hidden. The review team starts interviews this afternoon, Madison said. Community advisors get voting seats on the workforce budget by Friday. And the first stipend checks go out next week. Darius looked at the training yard, not at her. Good. She nodded, accepting the smallness of the word because the work behind it was not small. I know I have not earned trust. Trust is not earned by knowing that, he said. It is earned after. Madison looked down at the dust on her shoes, then back at the open bay where the trainees were gathering around the instructor. Then I will keep showing up. Darius finally turned to her. His expression was calm, measured, not warm enough to erase the past and not cold enough to deny the future. Show up when nobody is filming. The words settled between them like a final condition no contract could hold. Madison nodded. I will. A breeze moved across the yard, lifting the edge of a training manual on the table. Darius reached out and held it down with one hand, the simple gesture almost invisible beneath the larger story around them. In the distance, a row of panels caught the sun and sent a clean line of light across the concrete floor, over the boots of students, the wheels of tool carts, the legs of folding chairs, and the place where Madison stood listening instead of leading. Darius did not smile in triumph. Madison did not ask to be forgiven. The work began, and for once, that was enough. Justice did not arrive as applause. It arrived as a bus schedule changed, a stipend approved, a young man trained, a mother hired, a company watched, and a black man who had been publicly disrespected choosing not revenge, but standards strong enough to protect everyone who came after him.